Peter Linnier, and I've had real rounded out life. I've had the opportunity to see all sides of the coin, and I find myself very happy to be here after I come to Reno here. I have 11 grandchildren and two daughters and their husbands. And they're all well-founded here. That's why I came here. But I was first at one place here that 7 days later I packed up ready to go back to California. But it so happened that my granddaughter is at the district attorney's office. She knew something, I guess knew Ashley or something. And she said, "Peter, please don't go back." She said, "Come and take another look." Well, I've discounted two places. So I was here and moved in last November. And I'll tell you, it was such a shock from where I was. And I find that so often in the members here. The lifestyle, regimented to eat and regimented to go and all those things. However, I needed a tub. And Ashley said, "Please don't leave." She said, "We don't have tubs because of the insurance." And I said, "Well, I developed a fungus in the South Pacific, and I'm supposed to have an Aveeno bath every other day with certain ointment that keeps it down, which it does. So she found me a place with a tub, and after that I am no longer looking. Like I tell the people, you got problems, you can lay it on me. If you have any bitching to do, okay, bitch to me. If you want a shoulder to cry on, I'm here. And it has developed pretty good. So I am here. They'll have to throw me out in a fine box. And I like your staff. There's a certain amount of training, I guess, necessary in every place. And if it ever comes to the fact that this place becomes part of the market, why, I would keep the staff till I knew better. Now, if you want me to tell them a little bit about myself, I was born in Spokane, in what's called the Wild Rose Prairie, 20 miles outside of Spokane, Washington, January 7th, 1915. And my father and mother both from Verstad, Sweden. So I'm 100% Swede. I'm a first generation. The oldest of my mother's family, because my dad had been married twice, one of his children created a situation for his wife and died of childbirth, so inherited 3 more people in my family. We never called them stepsisters or stepbrothers because we didn't know. They were just our brothers and sisters. And after having had 3 different trades, we ended up in a place, North Dakota, western part called Watford City, a little ways from Mandan. And we had a section of ground, 760 acres, and one of the biggest homes in the area built by a Swede. It gave us 5 bedrooms. One of my folks had, and the other with us children. So we were comfortable. Went through my grades there, went through my high school there. Graduated in 1932 from high school. My father and mother were insisting on schooling in any place we wanted to go. I was unfortunate. I had a sister that had already migrated to Seattle. So I chose the University of Washington. It was Depression days. My dad had a little money and I had saved some money working as a geodetic surveyor, the rod man they called it. So I was able to attend because the fees at that time, no doubt, were much, much less than they are now. And it took me 5 years to graduate because of the fact that I had to work too. So that was my pleasure, just to get the education. I was told by my counselor that the law profession was not the profession for that particular time of life, but because the attorneys were out ambulance chasing and the engineers were out with picking shovels, so they had a good school of banking. And so I took some pre-law and then went into the banking. My first job was at Wells Fargo in San Francisco. I was the happiest man on campus. $55 a month. I stayed with Wells Fargo until the war opened up. I was 3.5 years in the Pacific, and I had, I guess, service there that was enviable to most officers. I was a supply officer, and that made everybody my friend because there was a pharmacy didn't have to make out their own booze. I could pick that up any place I wanted to, kept it going. And after the war, I had the opportunity to stay at the bank because my room was still reserved. But I'd been aboard this ship for 3.5 years and I got claustrophobia. I started one morning at 8 o'clock and I resigned at noon. And I went up Lake County, and my wife at that time had some relatives up there that had some land. So I bought 800 acres on my GI Bill and went into farming. I was the happiest man in the world. But my wife was a convent-bred city girl, and she didn't realize what it was to be on a farm. And after a couple of years, she got tired of it, nothing to do. So I went and made an arrangement, about 100 leghorns and built a chicken yard and a chicken coop, we call it, and gave her the pickup and said, the money is yours, you can make on your eggs. So she stood there day after day coddling eggs. I guess that got to her because about 6 months of that, I get a call from St. Louis. And I had been out in the shed tearing down a D2 because I felt that I wanted to get everything ready for the spring work. And I got this call. Said they had my application, they liked it. Would I be interested? I said, interested in what? I said, I'm out here in the barn. I said, my hands are full of grease, my boots are full of shit. So I said, I don't plan on going to New York to see you. Well, suppose you just wash your hands and put on a different pair of boots. Come out and see us on our time. So I did, and I took a 5-year contract, and we opened in the South small city charter banks. And I staffed them, I found the location, staffed them. So I took up my full 5-year contract, enjoyed every minute of it, but come time for renewal, they would double my salary if I stayed, because at that time I was supervising the banks too. And what you do with a small bank like that, you sell it probably as soon as your footings, at least. This was only a $500,000 startup. When it hit $1 million, why, the county would be interested, or the state would be interested. That's how the investors made their money. Built up the footings, sold it, made the investors happy, moved on. And I enjoyed every moment of it because it was different and it was the South. In fact, my first office was on Brown Street, next to the French quarters on Bourbon Street. So my wife said, well, Peter, by the time I had 3 children, I had one here in California to start out with. She said, I don't care what you do, if you go ahead and sign up again, but I'm getting the hell out of the South. I'm going back to California. Well, I didn't sign up for a new contract. I call her and tell her to have the Beacon send out the furniture and take the seat out of the back seat of the Lincoln, send that along, and take it down to, we knew Joe Causey. I said, have him put a playpen in the back there. So I got there, and that was in Louisville, Kentucky. That was my last office. So they really fixed that up, just as though it were a limo and a big old Lincoln, you know, with even a screen and a pass-through to the front seats. So we took 3 months going from Louisville, Kentucky back to California because we took some sightseeing trips. After which I got involved again in the finance industry. I went ahead and took more law, went back up to Spokane, set out a little flyer, opened an office, real estate and law. Very timely because the Washington Public Power Company were building nuclear plants. And about 5,000 people came in. Burns and Rowe were the big contractors. And as a result of their demise, and I mean the nuclear plants were outlawed. Washington Public Power had to go bankruptcy. All these 5,000 people had to leave town, go back to their old homes, is what they chose to do. And the banks were settled with REOs, that real estate owned. Then I was busy, and we had 2 years of this decommissioning. After which I opened my law office, or I had already opened it. And that was my last, actually, position in the I then came to California, moved here to Reno, my family was, and just this side of Windy Hill, bought a piece of property, opened up a car restoration business. I had foreign cars, Jaguars was my favorite, some Mercedes, and I found a man here that was formerly in the Marine Corps and what they call the automotive section. So he was a good mechanic. Well, I could do quite a bit of it because that would have been my hobby. And that lasted until I lost full sight. I got my left eye restored a bit, but my right eye had to get a prosthesis on. Prior to that, I had a prostate operation because my prostate showed a great deal of cancer. Went through that orbit, and then shortly thereafter, and they're checking on their lab work, they found out I had a cancerous colon. So I went back in for another radical. They wanted me to take chemo, and I turned that down because I know what chemo does. Took some radiation. And I lost my wife. She died of a heart attack. We had built a big home there with my shed, my little workshop, and a 4-bedroom home because I knew that relatives would be coming in and stopping in, friends. And I sold out because it was too far away in the country and I couldn't find a good driver. I found one, and he said this, you know, how do you want me to handle the car? And I said, well, I want you to take it home with you and come because I could probably call in the middle of the night sometime. Well, I got a call in the middle of the night. He was in jail, DUI, and my car was impounded. So that was the biggest, that's a no-go from that time on. So I sold, moved into Grass Valley property, which is just a beautiful little community. and became involved in community service work for 15 years. I couldn't hear well and I couldn't see well, but that didn't make any difference. I could use my big glass. I had a big screen I put my papers on. And my wife had been my paralegal, so I lost her, but I found another one, and we were just doing just fine. But for $3,000 a month after 12 years, that took a big hunk out of my savings. And the children then asked if I wouldn't please come to California because I was doing poorly. Well, what really brought it on, my driver, excellent person, in-home care person, taking me to that was 5 days after I was released from the hospital, where I had a 5-day 5 days, what do you call it? Sometimes my memory just loses a word or two. And anyway, in taking me to get my prescription, we were broadsided. I ended up in the hospital again, after just 5 days after my release, with a broken back and 2 broken ribs. So I thought, well, that tells me something. So that's when the kids wanted me to come up. And I started telling you about places I saw. One was supposed to be a Cadillac of the industry, and they had nothing more to offer. Found this place, and here I am.